Every day, millions of Americans rely on public transportation to get to work, to school, and to essential services. But for too many, access to reliable and affordable public transportation is a luxury, not a necessity.
It's pretty.
These are the voices of communities across America, united by a common goal: transit equity. We envision a nation where everyone, regardless of their income, race, or disability, has access to safe, reliable, and affordable public transportation. Together, we can build a national network that connects our communities, strengthens our economy, and creates a more just and equitable future for all. We are the Transit Equity Network. Welcome all. Happy Transit Equity Day. Happy Transit Equity Day to everyone. Happy Wednesday to everyone. Oh, I hope everyone is hopefully warming up after this insane weather that we've been having, at least in the eastern half of the United States. I don't know where everyone else is coming from, but definitely comment in the chat where you're coming from and where you're watching from as we come into this. But yes, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for our annual Transit Equity Day Live. My name is Bakari Height. I'm Executive Director of the Transit Equity Network, and welcome to the Transit Equity Network and this thing we call Transit Equity Day. Now, if you're just joining us for the first time and you don't know what Transit Equity Day is, you're definitely about to find out. But anyone who's returning, thank you for joining us once again, and definitely share this live with someone who would definitely need this information. Now, I just wanted to orient you with how this is going to work, and if you've never been here before, definitely comment into the chat. Definitely where you're from, where you're coming from, and just anything that goes along with the conversation. I want this to be as interactive as possible, so I'll definitely read your comments as they come along. Also, if you see the ticker tape below, that is full of wonderful information, especially if your local transit system is actually hosting fare-free days. And usually this is the thing for a lot of systems around the country, that they'll host fare-free days for Transit Equity Day as a way to commemorate this. So definitely check. And if there's any that aren't on this list, definitely let me know when I can add it on here. But yeah, I'll show some of these comments. Happy Transit Equity Day. Adam from Public Rail Now joining from Cleveland, Ohio. Shout out to Public Rail Now, wonderful organization, and salute to Adam. We did a wonderful podcast together about the Transit Equity Network and just, explaining what transit equity is. Also, we have Matthew from Cincinnati listening while at work. Hello, shout out to Cincinnati. Ohio is definitely in the house. There's some really great things going on in Ohio as far as transit, and especially on the intercity realm as well. So huge shout out to you all. Yeah, wonderful. Well, we'll just go ahead and get into it. As far as what we're going to be going over today, I'll do an introduction on what Transit Equity Day is. We'll also do a memorial for Claudette Cloven, who's one of the fearless leaders of the civil rights era and the desegregationist era of Montgomery. She passed last month, so we'll definitely do a memorial for her. And we'll do a little case study on equity, and we'll do a case study from where I'm currently at in Maryland. and some actions that we're doing to combat it. Also, we'll open the link up if anyone wants to join, and we can talk about whatever's going on in your community. We can talk about some of the topics that we went over. And we'll also talk about something that's really important on the federal level, and that's reauthorization. And then we'll open the link up and then we'll close out. So moving into it, just an introduction to me. My name is Bakari Height. As I've said before, I'm the executive director of the Transit Equity Network. If you'd like to advertise with us, if you'd like to work with us, do some consulting, or if you'd like us to join any kind of campaign that you have, definitely email us at transitequitynetwork@gmail.com, and we'll definitely get back to you. Also, follow us on all of our social media networks. We're at Facebook at the Transit Equity Network, Twitter and Blue Sky at Transit Equity N. And if you're watching us right now on our YouTube, definitely subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, Transit Equity Network. We're definitely going to be posting more content here as it comes along, and definitely give us any ideas if you'd like to showcase yourself or showcase anything that you have going on that's transit related. We really love to have some collaboration going on. So for those who are new to Transit Equity Day, you're probably wondering what it's about. Well, Transit Equity Day merges local grassroots organizations and labor unions to showcase inequities throughout the country while honoring Rosa Parks for her efforts and others for this progress. So today is actually Rosa Parks' birthday. So we wanted to honor her in that way, in all of the work that she and Claudette Cloven and other folks have done to get us to this point. But we still have a lot of work to do. So we still want to at least honor them as for what they have done, and definitely really keep up this work. So the vision for the Transit Equity Network is we envision a world where public transportation is equitable, affordable, reliable, and safe for all. And I think I speak for everyone when, we don't really we really judge the system based off of if we get any of this. And this is part of the work that we're really trying to do to figure out how we can get to this point to where everyone is afforded this and not just some. So I've always wanted to start off with a pop quiz, usually when I present this to folks, of just knowing where is your closest transit stop. And this is key of kind of understanding about this work of figuring out where your transit is to figure out if you have an equity issue with your public transportation. So usually people do know it if they do take transit, but for people who don't necessarily take transit a lot, it may just be a huge question of where is my closest transit stop? Where does it go? How often does it run? And usually these are some of the questions that usually prevent people from taking it because of the shyness, maybe the anxiety of not knowing what to do, not knowing how to do it. So we'll look into more of that and just kind of ways that you can figure that out and help others so that we can grow this pot. But one of the reasons why we do focus on public transportation is that it's one of the major ways of reducing energy consumption and carbon dioxide in the air. Transportation is one of the leading causes of pollution. And by taking public transportation, you're lessening that. And a lot of systems like what you see here, which is one of the regional rail lines for the SEPTA system in the Philly region, is 100% completely electric. And that's a great way to reduce not only carbon emissions, but also single occupancy drivers. If you have such good public transportation in your city, you won't need a car as much, or you won't be in so much of a car dependent place because most of public transportation usually go where you need to go. And Philadelphia is one of the cities that is really well covered by public transportation, but there's still a lot of equity concerns that need to be fixed. So what is Transit Equity Day really? Well, I want to start off with the whole point of what is equity. Equity, not necessarily equality where everyone gets the same treatment. Usually some places get better treatment than others. So we want to have people have their same level of treatments wherever they are. So if you look at this point of a project that I worked on in Atlanta with my nonprofit, the MARTA Army, we looked at the inequities of stops. So if you see on the left, you see a train station. This is actually at the King Memorial Station, right south of the King Center in Atlanta. And you see that you have platforms and really expansive platforms. You've got shelter, you've got real-time arrival information to let you know when the next train is coming, if there are delays coming, so you have that knowledge base if you need to maybe switch your trips up or find another route. And you also even have, if you could see in the corner, you have an elevator that signifies that if you are ADA accessible, that there's a way to get down without having to take the stairs. So you see, you kind of have everything that is set up for a really dignified stop. And then on the right, you see a bus stop that's covered in kudzu, which is a common thing down south. But you see that you don't see the road really. You don't see any kind of bench if you need to sit down. You don't see any kind of covering. So if it rains, if it snows, then you're just there. So, and this is the one on the right is usually what you'll see on the southern end of the Metro Atlanta region versus what you see on the right, which you can see some of these stations, but they're far and few in between. So that's where we really focus on this whole point of equity. It's not necessarily getting everybody the same thing, but making sure everyone has a level that they can get to with this service. So we wanted to create a program to address this. So we came up with this program called Operation Bus Stop Census, and we launched it on Transit Equity Day in Atlanta. And we got a lot of our partners like IXX Life, the Georgia Sierra Club, Partnership for Southern Equity, and a lot of other groups to really come in to really beg MARTA to really focus on this and figure out ways to do this. And we came up with a solution for this called Operation Bus Stop Census. And essentially what we did was we did a crowdsourced program where people, riders themselves, or if they don't ride at all, could comment on bus stops around the Metro Atlanta area. And there are over 9,000 bus stops that were in this area. But not a lot of them really were accounted for as far as any issues that they may have. So if there was glass that was broken, if there was no lighting, if it was unsafe to walk at the next intersection, if there were no places to walk at the next intersection, if it wasn't any cutouts for people that had wheelchairs. So we wanted to do this project to allow people to just voice that, because there clearly wasn't enough staff to go to every single one of these stops to comment on them. But if we cut the middleman and actually showcased, hey, here's a report where we commented on these stops, then it would lessen the workload. And it would also get towards a point of some kind of change. Now, we were able to get over 3,000 of these bus stops, which was a huge and tremendous help. And we absolutely thank everyone who participated into this census. But it was a really great showing of coalitions coming together to try to get this information to the powers that be. And that's exactly what we did. Now, here's a little bit of a timeline for what we did with this. We had a presentation at 5 Points, which is our central train station in Atlanta. We brought on our partners to speak in their respective talks. We unveiled the program as Operation Bus Stop Census. Now, this was also really, it was a huge challenge because this was also the same year that the pandemic started. Matter of fact, this was right before the pandemic started. So it was a huge challenge of figuring out how are we going to get people to do this safely, given all of the restrictions that were happening. But we got it done, and that was why we had to switch to an online platform. So we actually created a website where people can go on Google Maps and actually showcase what the bus stops look like. But we were able to do one in-person stop data collection in a Southside neighborhood in Atlanta. And we learned a lot. We learned that a lot of people were dumping trash on a lot of these roads. We learned that speeding was a huge issue. So it was kind of a lot of the information that you would not necessarily get if you had somebody from the agency coming by and just recording the bus stops. But we got to learn a lot from the locals there about the things that they were having issues with. We ended the collection at the end of the year. And the next year, we released the report. And we gave the report to MARTA for them to use to their discretion. So this is one example of a Transit Equity Day action. And Transit Equity Day is also a huge day of action and a huge opportunity for any kind of action. Other sample actions, if you don't want it to be that huge, outside of that is what a lot of transit agencies do is reserving a seat on the bus for Rosa Parks. And this is usually just a way to show solidarity for this because Rosa Parks refused to get up from her seat in 1955. So this is just kind of a memorial to just kind of symbolize that. So if you're riding transit today, you may see this somewhere. But also some of our partners did creative things like William Hamilton, who's one of our partners in Charleston, South Carolina, led a march to the beach because one of their big campaigns was restoring bus service to the beaches in South Carolina, which they were successful in doing. And that was kind of a point of just making this kind of activism fun. It doesn't have to be tired. It doesn't have to be tiresome. It doesn't have to be mundane. Make it fun. Folks have also done things like do pancake breakfast using Rosa Parks' pancake recipe. But a lot of this is really building the network. You want to be able to attract groups like this, and especially younger groups, because you want people to carry on this work. You want people to learn why this work is important, and especially given that it's dealing with other people. So it's also this philanthropic part of this. You also want to strengthen labor relations. There are a lot of labor unions that have a lot of issues with these transit systems that go unreported, and they also need your support as well. So working with different labor unions like the Amalgamated Transit Union, the Transport Workers Union, IBEW works on a lot of electrification for a lot of these transit systems. And even groups that work with these unions like the Railroad Workers Union. It's great to have a lot of these groups on hand so that you have some kind of partnership with people that are on the ground that can literally tell you what's going on right there. Also with different environmental justice groups. A lot of them have chapters all across the country, so that's a definite way to expand the work of Transit Equity Day, and especially because transit equity is also an environmental issue. You're, like I said before, you're lessening the amount that you're depending on the vehicle. So sharing the ride is definitely that. Also with just meeting different local transit advocates. I know they're all around the place, so it's difficult to try to get us all in one space together. But now with the internet, it's easy for us to make those connections. So definitely share all of the social medias if possible, so that we can continue to keep in contact, because that's the only way that that's one of the only ways that we're going to be able to expand this work, is that if we keep networking. As mentioned, we do want to dedicate this live stream to Claudette Colvin, who many of you may not know was actually the first person to really challenge the desegregationist laws in Montgomery, Alabama. Now, I wanted to read this quote, and it also kind of reinforces why we're really doing this work. It says, "When I think about why I'm seeking to have my name cleared by the state, it is because I believe that that if that happened, it would show the generation growing up now that progress is possible and things do get better. It will inspire them to make the world better." Now, it took her a while to really get her record expunged after she was arrested in Montgomery. And it was a lot of scrutiny behind this. And there were rumors basically saying that they didn't want her to be the face of the movement because she was pregnant at the time. And of course, she did this months before Rosa did this, and Rosa refused to get up from her seat in December. So we definitely speak her name, and like I said, we definitely dedicate this live to her and her defined actions, as well as Rosa Parks' defined actions, and everyone else that was a part of that movement. And she was also one of the plaintiffs that led to the legislation to desegregate the buses in Montgomery. So it's definitely important that we lift her up, and especially after her untimely death last month. And we definitely will continue to do this work in make this good for her and everyone else. So I wanted to go over another case of equity and use Maryland as just kind of a case study for this. So if you don't know, I currently live in Maryland, but kind of another similar situation. And I'll definitely speak to this from the heart because I take public transit a lot here. I don't own a car, so I'm definitely privy to a lot of the issues that we've had with public transportation here. But we do have train service here in a mixture of trains. We have light rail service, we have a subway here in Baltimore, and we also have a much heavier rail service between DC and Baltimore and some of its suburbs called MARC. Now, MARC has certain stops in Baltimore, and here's a tale of two of them. So on the right, you'll see this is kind of an entrance to Baltimore Penn Station, which is our main train station in the city of Baltimore. It's where we get all of our Amtrak service. It's also where we get the main MARC services through the Penn line, which is our heaviest line that runs through Maryland. So this is one of the newest platforms that they built with the intention of doing this for Acela, which is one of the more premium services for Amtrak. So you can see it's really well lighted. There's escalator services. There's also like these nice marble floors. It looks really nice. And mind you, this is in a station that is a century old plus. And then to the left, you see the West Baltimore MARC station. Now, the West Baltimore MARC station is not necessarily in the most prosperous of areas in Baltimore. But probably one of the biggest issues with the station is the fact that there's no ADA accessibility at all. As you can see, these are the steps leading up to the station. And I've taken many buses to the station to get to DC or to get to other places on the MARC system. And it's always been so difficult trying to traverse these steps because there's just so many of them. And if you see the train, you literally having to run and you're almost causing yourself to trip. Also for the fact that this station is much longer than it is where these platforms are, which the platforms are really tiny. So if you do get off on and off the train, you usually have to do so at certain places. So if you're on the train and you're at the far end, they'll always tell you to come like maybe 3 or 4 trains out so you can't get off, so you can't disembark from the train and then go down steps again. So access is not necessarily the greatest thing with the station versus, the one on the right where they're literally welcoming you to Baltimore. But another issue with the station is for the fact that there's supposed to be upgrades for the station. Unfortunately, they're coming really, really slow because it's also in conjunction with the Frederick Douglass Tunnel, which is right north of this station, that's also being repaired. Not only is it not going to happen, but maybe 2032, but a lot of the residents in the area are really suffering because of all of this work, because of the fact that they're not really being compensated fairly for the air rights as well as the subterranean rights that Amtrak is using, as well as with the vents that will go up. One's actually going up near an elementary school. So it doesn't feel like that they're getting the same level of service with either one with this stop versus Baltimore Penn Station, which is also going a huge renovation, but will yield a lot more than the stop in West Baltimore. So as of recent, a lot of organizers have really been trying to work on something called the Be More Bus Plan. Now, essentially what that will do is that will pump a lot more money into the core bus service within the Baltimore region. Right now, it's severely underfunded, as the only funding that really comes through it, other than the federal formula funding, is through a pot of money called the Transportation Trust Fund. Now, essentially, that would put it in the same realm as highway projects, as airport projects, as projects at the port. So there's usually having to share that pot with other things. So transit usually gets the short end of the stick, even though there's a lot of people that depend on public transportation in the state of Maryland. A third of the population of Baltimore alone don't own cars. So public transit is really important. But a lot of the buses here don't really get a lot of the love that they should be. So earlier this week, organizers, and especially from the Better Transit Now organization, um, marched to the State House in Annapolis to demand that there be some funding that's put into this. There's not as much funding put into the Be More Bus Plan, which would also put a fifth bus division so that there can be more frequent service on a lot of these bus routes. Now, the key part of this campaign was that this involved students who also are a huge population of the bus system in the state of Maryland. Middle school students and up have to take public transportation to get to school because there are no school buses in the city of Baltimore. So they're a huge, huge part of why this is important, because if they fail, then we failed them. And a lot of students usually end up coming to school late, usually having to take 2 or 3 buses, which could sometimes take over 2 hours to get to the school of their choice. And then they're still penalized for it, which that night we heard so many stories from these kids who explained how they're not really being supported with having just really such a transit system that just doesn't work for them. Now, we could really push a lot more with this, and there is a lot that we can really do with this. So if you're in Maryland, I would definitely implore you to join any of these organizations that are working for this, or definitely contact your representatives. Right now, the legislative session is going on in the state of Maryland, as it is in a lot of other places. So this is definitely not just applicable to Maryland, but it's applicable to everywhere. Definitely go and call your local elected officials, go visit them if you do have the time, and definitely stress for them of the importance of having this kind of public transportation, but public transportation that's adequate enough for people to get to their needs and not have to strain so much versus people that drive. We've also seen this most recently with the snow that we have received, and how the first thing that they've plowed was the streets, while the sidewalks were still covered in ice and snow, which made it hugely difficult for people to move around. To where MDOT MTA made a statement basically saying that it wasn't their responsibility, but it was the right of way of the jurisdiction in question for any of their bus stops. Which passing the buck off to someone else doesn't necessarily help, and especially if you're still trying to run the service, but people having to step over ice and people having to step over snow and almost breaking their leg or breaking any kind of ligaments just because you don't think it's your responsibility. So I put that as just kind of an urgency of making sure that while there is snow in the forecast coming again, to note that when you're thinking about everyone that's using the system. But a little bit more of a breakdown of the Maryland Transit Administration. They provide rail bus and express bus and paratransit throughout the Baltimore region and some suburbs of Washington, D.C. Now, some of the needs and the motivations for this is definitely more funding, but a better way to raise funding for the operations. And that was one of the biggest issues, was because not a lot of this is really going to operations, which the MTA, like a lot of other transit systems, spend a lot more in a huge amount on labor, because of course you want to make sure that labor is compensated and compensated fairly. But this does put a strain on everything else, as well as putting out service, which a lot of these kids did comment saying that a lot of these buses sometimes don't show up at all, which really puts them at a huge disadvantage of being able to get to their places on time. So there has to be a steady stream of funding for public transportation in general, and especially given that you have a high amount of people that use this. Now, some of the pain points, like I mentioned before, the Transportation Trust Fund disproportionately funds other modes over public transportation, including transit for suburban Washington, D.C. Both major counties outside of Washington, D.C., Prince George's County and Montgomery County, have fare-free systems on their respective systems. However, people within the core bus service of the Maryland Transit Administration still are expected to pay for a lot of their for their rides. Now, opportunities, like I mentioned, are the Be More Bus Plan. There's also another act in Maryland called the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act. And essentially what that would do is that would prioritize cleaner transportation modes based on how sustainable of a criteria they are, and especially with Maryland's wanting to also conserve its energy. So that will be a huge boost to public transportation, given the fact that it is a way to reduce not only traffic, but also to reduce pollution and carbon emissions. Also, another point is transit-oriented development. The state of Maryland has over 100 train stations within the state. So that's 100 opportunities to do transit-oriented development, to where you're building development around these train stations. That would not only put people right at public transportation, but that would also pump money into the revenue for it. And that's something that a lot of these groups have also been trying to do, is look at land value tax to focus on that land around public transportation stops, whether they be train stations or whether they be major hubs for buses. And that would really put a lot of these places in much higher value than others. One of the places where the state of Maryland is currently working on this is Bowie State, which is a historically Black college in Prince George's County. They have a lot of land that could be used for redevelopment for that. So that's something that MDOT MTA is currently working on. And I hope that is replicated around the state so that they could put a much bigger value on public transportation. Now, let's go on to the bigger picture of this, and that's the reauthorization. Now, I know you probably have heard it, but if not, I'll explain it a little bit. So the reauthorization is part of a much bigger name known as the Surface Transportation Reauthorization. Now, this is the process for renewing the federal surface transportation program, which essentially would determine how transportation is funded, what would be funded, and what policies would run it. So you may have seen certain names about it, like in the past, like ICE-T or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the IIJA. These are different names for these different surface transportation programs. And they determine what gets funded, how much they get funded, and if it does carry on. Now, needs and motivations for this is definitely to build on what we just had, which was the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Now, that would put in that bill was over $60 billion for Amtrak. And that would definitely affect a lot of people. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, well, I live in a small town and I don't really have public transportation, well, you probably live somewhere that or near that has some kind of Amtrak station, whether it's a big station like Washington Union Station in DC, or Penn Station in New York, or Chicago, or LA, or a very tiny station like Carbondale, Illinois. That matters because you're using that to get from somewhere to another place. It's a huge connector. It's a connector to much larger economies where you can get jobs, where you can go and get higher education, as well as with things that are outlawed in certain states. Like if you're looking for reproductive studies or reproductive services, that usually is your ticket out of there. So it's really key to focus on this, because if you're not getting funded locally, and if this passes in the way that it really cuts transit services, this could mean dire consequences for public transportation everywhere. Now, some of the pain points is that most of the funding comes through the Highway Trust Fund and very little goes to public transportation. So if you're around in the 80s, you learned about the 80-20 split, where 80% of that goes towards highways and the 20% goes towards others, usually public transportation. So that's already been a small pot that it seems like, because the cost of everything is going up and the cost of operations are going up, then it really does spell a doom and gloom for public transportation. Now, some opportunities for this are a lot of the appropriation bills. For example, one of them is CMAQ, which stands for Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality. So it's one of the bills that determines how much is divvied out to reduce air quality in a lot of places. I know when I lived in Georgia, that was definitely a case for Metro Atlanta when Atlanta hosted the Olympics in 1996, where funds were withheld for anything else until Atlanta figured out a way to reduce congestion because of the smog getting so heavy, because everyone a lot of people drove instead of taking public transportation. But not a lot was really gone towards public transportation to really pump it up. And a lot of that money went towards programs like Georgia Commute Options, to where it allows you to find a cleaner way to get to work other than driving alone. So, that's an example of it. Now, Congress must pass this budget by resolution between a lot of these 12 bills. Now, sometimes it does get extended because there's not consensus on this. So my quest to all of you is making sure that you do contact your local elected officials. Please let them know how important public transportation is and how it needs to be funded. If you have stories like my stories with transit here in Maryland, definitely give them to them so that they can show it and show the pain that we're feeling and figuring out how we can get more funding for this. Now, other ways you can support, like I mentioned before, organizing a local event. Now, if you don't know people that you can get to do this, this is the perfect time to organize it. It could be something as small as just, starting a Facebook group of people interested in transit in whatever city, whether it be Omaha, Nebraska, whether it be Albuquerque, New Mexico, but just organizing a local event. It could even be a happy hour. But just getting people in the same room to talk about this and to strategize things to do about this is really helpful, because it really shows of the support that you have now and the support you could be getting. Also, social media is a big thing. Just get the word out on social media. Now, Transit Equity Day is a really important and key day if you do want to tag your representatives, because it's such a nationally recognized day. Even when he was Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg recognized it in 2021. So it became a household name even before then, but it definitely was boosted up then. But also support. Like I said, right below are a lot of the systems that are offering free trips today. So if you've never taken public transportation, today's the perfect day to do it if your agency is offering it for free. But it's also a great way to showcase where you can go with this. Like I said, one of the big anxieties with people not taking public transportation is that they just don't know how to either read the schedule, determining when it works, or even just kind of figuring out where it goes if they're going to get back in time. And there are a lot of tools to do that. Google Maps is a great way to do that. Also, the transit app is a great way to determine when the bus comes and what exact time and how to track it. So there are a lot of tools out here that you can use to figure this out. Once again, if you'd like to follow us on all of our social media networks, here it is. And I can also drop them into the chat if you're interested. Facebook at Transit Equity Network, Twitter and Blue Sky at Transit Equity In, as well as our YouTube page. Definitely subscribe to us at Transit Equity, or just search the Transit Equity Network in the YouTube page. And with that, I will drop the link if anyone wants to come up and join and give into the conversation. I can absolutely open the conversation to folks. But yeah, shout out to everyone who's watching this and who's sharing this with folks. We definitely want the Transit Equity Network to grow. And salute to everyone who's been with us for the past few years. Christopher Jackson said about the deliver in Dripping Springs, Texans. Shout out to you, Chris Jackson. Chris Jackson's another great organizer from Charleston, South Carolina. Another point for public transportation that a lot of people don't necessarily think of. If you've always wondered how people get groceries on public transportation, I would use stories like that of just kind of the daily needs if you do take public transportation solely, of just kind of the daily needs that you would need, and how difficult it is, because I've definitely also lived through that of figuring out how to get groceries onto a bus, and especially if the bus is packed, or if you're in a wheelchair, or if you have another disability, of how difficult it is to have buses pass by you because it's full and there's no room to put down the wheelchair. I'll be uploading a lot of videos from our past archives of conversations we've had. We actually had a really amazing panel with people who have a disability and just kind of getting their experiences with riding public transportation. So, but yeah, there are all types of ways that, we can come to this table and bring this out. Sierra Club has done a really amazing job with just bringing in the environmental aspect of it with different events that they hold, like the Transit to Trails, which is an event I attended a few years ago here in Maryland, where a lot of us took the bus to go walk a trail in the woods. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize, is that public transportation sometimes is a great way to enact people from the cities to get to nature. So that was a huge benefit for them. Also with the labor unions, one of the groups that started Transit Equity Day was the Amalgamated Transit Union. And that's just because labor is a really integral part of this movement. So it's great to bring them in and also bring their voices in as well. So yeah, I would definitely recommend making sure that you're bringing in any of these voices that we don't necessarily hear, so that we can really push this point home about funding public transportation. But if nothing else, we will end it there. Definitely share this live with anyone that you can. Also, once again, email me at transitequitynetwork@gmail.com if you have any questions, if you'd like to partner with us, or if you'd like for us to come and do any kind of organizing in your city. We definitely thank you for joining us today, and we definitely want to see you around. We hope you all have a really wonderful Transit Equity Day. Thank you so much.
Every day, millions of Americans rely on public transportation to get to work, to school, and to essential services. But for too many, access to reliable and affordable public transportation is a luxury, not a necessity.
It's pretty.
These are the voices of communities across America, united by a common goal: transit equity. We envision a nation where everyone, regardless of their income, race, or disability, has access to safe, reliable, and affordable public transportation. Together, we can build a national network that connects our communities, strengthens our economy, and creates a more just and equitable future for all. We are the Transit Equity Network.